Commander Jake Harrison stood in the cold metal room of the human flagship UHS Liberty and watched the blue lights flicker on the wall. The Galactic Arbitration Court had been talking for 3 months about the war between humans and the Xanthari. Aliens. Jake knew this day would decide if both races lived or died. The hologram judges appeared in front of him like ghosts made of light. There were 12 different alien species sitting in judgment today. Some looked like giant insects, others like walking trees, and a few resembled nothing Jake had ever seen before. They had spent months listening to both sides argue about who started the war and who was to blame. Jake remembered how it all began 3 years ago on the planet Kepler 442b. Human colonists were making the world ready for people to live on. They were clearing land and building cities when they accidentally destroyed an old Xanthari temple. The humans did not know it was there, because it was buried under centuries of dirt and rocks. When the Xanthari found out, they were very angry. Xanthari were a proud warrior race with blue skin and 4 arms. They were taller and stronger than humans, and they had ruled that part of space for thousands of years. The temple was sacred to them, built by their ancestors long before humans. Even knew there were other planets with life on them. The Xanthari demanded that all humans leave their territory immediately. Earth's government tried to explain it was an accident, but the aliens would not listen. They said humans were destroyers who had no respect for other cultures. The talks failed, and soon ships from both sides were shooting at each other. War was brutal. Millions of people died on both sides. Human colonies were burned to ash, and Xanthari worlds were bombed from space. Jake had fought in many of those battles and seen good friends die. He knew that if the fighting continued, both races might destroy each other completely. The lead judge was a tall being with silver skin and no face that Jake could see. It spoke in a voice that sounded like wind through metal pipes. Commander Harrison stepped forward. Jake walked to the center of the room. His heart was beating fast, but he kept his face calm like a good soldier should. Behind him stood Admiral Lisa Carter, his commanding officer and mentor. She had trained him since he was a young officer, and he respected her more than anyone in the fleet. The court has reached a decision, the Silver Judge said. The war between humanity and the Xanthari Confederation must end before both species are extinct. We have found a solution based on ancient Xanthari law. Jake waited. He had expected they would order a ceasefire or divide up the disputed territory. He was not ready for what came next. You, Commander Harrison, will marry both granddaughters of Supreme Elder Kathmiran, the leader of all Xanthari people. This union will create the strongest possible bond between your species and prevent further war. The room went silent. Jake felt like someone had hit him in the stomach with a metal bar. Marry aliens? 2 of them? He had never even seen a Xanthari woman, and now they wanted him to spend his life with 2 of them. The unity of 3 hearts is the most sacred bonding ritual in Xanthari culture, another judge explained. This one looked like a giant bird with purple feathers. It has never been attempted between different species, but our scientists believe it is possible. You have been chosen because your genetic makeup is compatible with Xanthari biology. This trait exists in less than 1 in 1,000 humans. Admiral Carter stepped forward. Your Honor, Commander Harrison needs time to consider this decision. He has 48 hours, the Silver Judge replied. If he refuses, the war will continue until one or both species are destroyed. If he accepts, both races will be bound by the marriage alliance, according to Xanthari law. Any attack on one species will be considered an attack on the family bond itself. The judges disappeared, leaving Jake alone with Admiral Carter and Dr. Amy Phillips, the fleet's expert on alien cultures. Jake sat down heavily in a chair and put his head in his hands. This is insane, he said quietly. They want me to marry two aliens I have never met to stop a war. How is that supposed to work? Dr. Phillips opened her computer tablet and showed him pictures of the two Xanthari princesses. Princess Velinara is the older one. She is a warrior and military commander. Princess Zixara is younger and works as a diplomat. Both are considered very intelligent and skilled by their people. Jake looked at the pictures. The aliens were tall and blue-skinned like all Xanthari, with long silver hair and 4 arms each. They were clearly not human, but there was something almost familiar about their faces. Their eyes showed intelligence and strength. The Xanthari take marriage very seriously, Dr. Phillips continued. Once you are bonded to them, their entire culture will see humans as family. Any Xanthari who attacks a human will be considered a traitor to their own blood. It could actually work to stop the war. Admiral Carter sat down across from Jake. The Earth government has already agreed to this arrangement. They see it as the only way to prevent total war. But the choice is still yours, Jake. No one can force you to do this. Jake laughed bitterly. Can't they? If I say no, billions of people die. If I say yes, I give up my life as I know it. Some choice. You have always put duty before personal desires, Admiral Carter said gently. That is why you were chosen for this. The court knows you will do what is best for humanity, even if it costs you everything. Captain Ben Murphy, Jake's best friend since their academy days, entered the room. His face was grim. I just got word from the front lines. The Xanthari are massing a huge fleet near the Titan colonies. If this alliance does not happen, they plan to attack Earth itself within the month. Jake closed his eyes and thought about his home on the frontier colony of New Montana. He remembered his parents' farm and the wide open spaces where he used to run as a boy. He thought about all the human worlds that would burn if the war continued. He thought about the Xanthari, soldiers he had killed, and wondered if they had families too. When he opened his eyes, his decision was made. I will do it, he said quietly. I will marry the Xanthari princesses and try to save both our peoples. Admiral Carter nodded with sad pride. I knew you would make the right choice. We will begin preparations immediately. As Jake prepared to leave his old life behind, he wondered what kind of future awaited him among the stars with 2 alien wives he had never met. The fate of 2 civilizations now rested on a marriage that seemed impossible, but it was the only hope left for peace. Jake arrived at Haven's Gate space station 3 days later, still trying to understand what his life had become. The massive station floated in neutral space between human and Xanthari territory, built specifically for meetings between different alien races. Its corridors buzzed with creatures from dozens of worlds, all eager to witness the first marriage between a human and Xanthari aliens. The station was bigger than any human city, with sections designed for different atmospheric needs and gravity levels. Jake walked through halls filled with beings he had only seen in military briefings. Some had tentacles instead of arms. Others floated in bubbles of strange gas. And a few looked so alien that Jake could not tell which end was their head doctor. Phillips walked beside him, explaining what would happen during the bonding ceremonies. The Xanthari believe that marriage is not just between 2 people, but between their minds and souls as well. You will have to share thoughts and memories with both princesses through a telepathic connection. Jake felt his stomach twist with nervousness. What kind of thoughts? Will they be able to see everything in my head? Only what you choose to share at first, Dr. Phillips replied. But as the bond grows stronger, the connection becomes deeper. Some Xanthari couples who have been married for many years can speak to each other across great distances without words. They reached the combat training area where Jake was supposed to meet Princess Velinara. The room was huge, with weapons from many different worlds hanging on the walls. In the center, A tall blue figure moved through a complex fighting routine with deadly grace. Princess Velinara was 7 feet tall with 4 muscular arms that moved like liquid metal. Her blue skin had darker patterns that looked like war paint, and her silver hair was braided with small metal ornaments. She wore simple training clothes that showed her impressive strength. When she moved, it was like watching a deadly dance. She noticed Jake watching and stopped her routine. Her eyes were the color of ice, cold and measuring. "So you are the human who thinks he can marry into Xanthari nobility," she said in perfect English, though her voice had a strange musical quality. "I am Commander Jake Harrison," he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "I did not ask for this marriage, but I will honor the agreement." Velinara picked up 2 long curved swords from Valin, a weapon rack. "Words are easy, human. Among my people, we test worthiness through combat. If you cannot fight beside me, you cannot be my husband." She threw 1 sword to Jake, who caught it awkwardly. The weapon was heavier than human swords and designed for someone with 4 arms instead of 2. Jake had trained with many different weapons, but this was completely new. "I should warn you," Velinara said with a cold smile. "I have never lost a battle in single combat." The fight began immediately. Velinara moved like lightning, her 4 arms striking from different angles at once. Jake barely managed to block the first few attacks, and he quickly realized that trying to match her strength would get him killed. Instead, he used human tactics that the Xanthari had never seen before. He rolled under her attacks, used the environment to his advantage, and fought in ways that her warrior training had not prepared her for. When she expected him to attack directly, he feinted and struck from an unexpected angle. The battle lasted 20 minutes. Jake was bleeding from several small cuts, and his arms ached from blocking her powerful strikes. But he had managed to land a few hits of his own, something that clearly surprised the Xanthari princess. Finally, Jake managed to get behind her and place his sword at her throat while she had her weapons pointed at his chest. They were locked in a position where either could kill the other instantly. "Interesting," Velinara said, breathing hard. "You fight like a coward, but an effective coward. You use tricks instead of honor." "I use what works," Jake replied. "Honor does not matter if you are dead." For the first time, Velinara smiled. It was not a warm smile, but it showed respect. "Perhaps you are not completely worthless after all. A warrior must be clever as well as strong." She stepped back and set down her weapons. "You have passed the first test, Jake Harrison. But do not think this makes us friends. We are bound together by duty, nothing more." The next day, Jake met Princess Zixara in the diplomatic quarters. This part of the station was quieter, filled with libraries and meeting rooms where alien ambassadors worked on treaties and trade agreements. Zixara was smaller than her sister, only 6.5 feet tall, but her presence was just as powerful. Where Velinara was built for war, Zixara was built for thinking. Her blue skin was lighter, and her silver hair was cut short in a practical style. Her 4 arms moved constantly as she worked on 3 different computer tablets at once. Looked up when Jake entered the room. Her eyes were the same ice color as her sister's, but they held a different kind of intelligence. Where Velinara measured physical strength, Zixara was measuring his mind. "Commander Harrison," she said without standing up, "please sit." "I have been studying human history and culture for the past 3 months. Your species is fascinating and terrifying in equal measure." Jake sat down across from her. "Terrifying? You are the only species we have encountered that fights wars for ideas, instead of territory or resources. You will die for concepts like freedom and justice that cannot be touched or measured. It makes you unpredictable and dangerous." She gestured to her tablets, which showed maps of human colonies and military reports. I have identified 12 different ways this marriage alliance could fail catastrophically. Would you like to hear them? Not particularly, Jake said, but I assume you are going to tell me anyway. Zixara smiled for the first time, and Jake was surprised to see that. It made her look much younger. You learn quickly. That is good. Stupid husbands are annoying. She spent the next hour explaining the political situation from the Zenthari perspective. Jake learned that many of her people saw the marriage as contamination of their pure bloodlines. There were military leaders who would rather die fighting than accept peace with humans. My grandfather, Supreme Elder Kathmiran, is very old and tired of war, Zixara explained. He has seen too many young warriors die for pride and honor, but he is also the only leader strong enough to make this alliance work. If something happens, to him, the peace treaty becomes worthless. Jake began to understand the enormous pressure on both princesses. They were not just marrying him, they were sacrificing their personal lives to save their people from extinction. On the third day, all three of them met for the sharing of minds ceremony. They sat in a circle in a special room designed for Zenthari telepathic rituals. The walls were covered with crystals that amplified psychic energy. Dr. Phillips explained the process. You will need to lower your mental defenses and allow the princesses to see into your thoughts and memories. In return, you will see into theirs. This creates the foundation for the marriage bond. Jake felt nervous about letting aliens see inside his head, but he knew this was necessary. He closed his eyes and tried to relax his mind like Dr. Phillips had taught him. The connection formed slowly, like waking up from a deep sleep. Suddenly, Jake could feel the presence of both princesses in his thoughts. It was strange and overwhelming, like having two extra voices in his head. Through the link, he experienced Velinara's memories of the war. He felt her pain when her closest friend died in a human attack on their home base. He saw her struggling with the knowledge that this marriage was her duty, even though it meant giving up her dream of dying honorably in battle. From Zixara, he experienced her incredible loneliness. She was too intelligent for most of her people to understand, and her role as a diplomat kept her isolated from normal Zenthari society. She had never had a real friend, only political allies and enemies. In return, Jake shared his own memories. The princesses saw his childhood on New Montana, running through wheat fields under alien suns. They experienced his military training and the weight of command that came with sending soldiers into battle. Most importantly, they felt his genuine desire to protect innocent people, even if those people were not human. When the connection ended, all three of them sat in silence for several minutes. The sharing had created an uncomfortable intimacy between them, showing parts of themselves they usually kept hidden. This is more difficult than I expected, Velinara said quietly. I thought you would be simple to understand, like most humans we have captured, but your mind is complex. Zixara nodded. You carry great sadness for the enemies you have killed. Most warriors glory in their victories, but you mourn for the lives lost on both sides. Jake stood up slowly, still feeling dizzy from the telepathic connection. I never wanted to be a killer. I became a soldier because someone has to protect the people who cannot protect themselves. Both princesses looked at him with something that might have been the beginning of respect. The sharing had shown them that their new husband was not the simple barbarian they had expected, but a man carrying the weight of command and the pain of necessary choices. As Jake prepared for the formal wedding ceremony, he wondered if this strange beginning might somehow lead to something more than just a political arrangement. The telepathic bond had shown him that both princesses were as trapped by duty as he was, and perhaps that shared burden could. The wedding took place on Zenther Prime, the ancient homeworld of the Zenthari people. Jake had never seen anything like the massive crystal temple where the ceremony would happen. The building was carved from a single enormous gem that had grown from the planet's core over millions of years. When sunlight hit it, the entire structure glowed with rainbow colors that hurt human eyes to look at directly. Thousands of Zenthari gathered to witness this historic event. They stood in perfect ranks, according to their military units and family clans, their blue faces showing mixtures of curiosity, anger, and resignation. Many had never seen a human before, and Jake could feel their stares like physical weight. On his shoulders, Supreme Elder Kathmiran waited at the altar. He was incredibly old, even by Zenthari standards, and his blue skin had faded to almost silver with age. Despite his advanced years, his presence commanded absolute respect from the Sun. Every person in the temple. His forearms moved slowly, but with dignity, as he gestured for the ceremony to begin. The ritual would last 3 days, combining ancient Zenthari traditions with hastily adapted human customs. Jake wore a mixture of human military dress uniform and Zenthari ceremonial armor that had been specially made for his smaller frame. The metal was uncomfortable and heavy, but Dr. Phillips had explained that wearing it showed respect for Zenthari culture. Princess Velinara entered the temple first, accompanied by her honor guard of female warriors. She wore traditional marriage, armor made from scales of the great crystal dragons that once lived on Zenther Prime. The armor was beautiful and terrifying at the same time, designed to show that she was both a bride and a deadly warrior. Her 4 arms carried weapons that had belonged to her ancestors for centuries. Princess Zixara followed, dressed in the robes of a diplomat and scholar. Her clothing was made from fabric that seemed to shift colors as she moved, and her 4 arms carried ancient books and scrolls that contained the laws and traditions of her people. Where Velinara represented the warrior tradition of the Zenthari, Zixara represented their wisdom and knowledge that the first day of the ceremony focused on trials of strength and courage. Jake had to prove himself worthy by completing tasks that tested his physical and mental abilities. He lifted massive stones, solved complex puzzles, and fought ceremonial battles against Zenthari champions. By human standards, the challenges were nearly impossible, but the telepathic bond with his wives allowed them to share their strength and knowledge with him. During the stone lifting trial, Jake felt Velinara's warrior training flow through their connection, showing him how to use his body more efficiently. When solving the ancient puzzles, Zixara's vast knowledge helped him understand references to Zenthari, history and culture that would have been meaningless to a human. The second day involved the sharing of culture ceremony. Jake had to demonstrate human traditions, while his wives showed him important aspects of Zenthari life. He taught them about human concepts like music and art, things that were rare in Zenthari warrior culture. In return, they showed him the Zenthari philosophy of honor and duty that governed every aspect of their society. The most difficult part came when Jake had to explain human humor to an audience of serious Zenthari warriors. What humans found funny often made no sense to aliens who valued honor above all else. But when he told a story about a clumsy soldier who accidentally saved the day through his mistakes, even some of the stern-faced Zenthari guards smiled slightly. Velinara surprised everyone by attempting to sing a human song she had learned from studying Earth broadcasts. Her voice was deeper than a human woman's, and the musical scales were completely different, but the effort showed her willingness to embrace human culture. Zixara demonstrated human-style dancing, which looked strange with her 4 arms, but showed genuine attempt to understand human expression. The third and final day brought the most challenging ritual, the melding of souls. This was far deeper than the sharing of minds they had experienced before. Jake, Velinara, and Zixara had to connect their thoughts and emotions completely, holding nothing back from each other. In the sacred chamber beneath the crystal temple, they sat in a triangle, with their hands touching. The telepathic crystals in the walls amplified their mental connection until the boundaries between their individual minds began to blur. Jake experienced Velinara's deepest fear, that she was becoming too attached to him and losing her warriors. Edge. She had been raised to value duty above personal feelings, and the growing warmth she felt toward her human husband frightened her. Through the connection, Jake felt her internal struggle between her conditioning as a soldier and her emerging emotions as a woman. From Zixara, he felt a different kind of fear. She was terrified that her vast intelligence made her incapable of normal emotional connections. She had spent her life analyzing everything, including her own feelings, until she was not sure what was real and what was just intellectual curiosity about the mating process. In return, Jake shared his own deepest terror, that he was not strong enough to carry the responsibility for peace between two entire species. Every decision he made could affect billions of lives, and the weight of that responsibility sometimes made it hard for him to sleep at night. The melding showed all three of them that despite their different species and cultures, they shared the same basic fears about duty, responsibility, and the possibility of caring for someone else. This revelation created a bond deeper than politics or strategy. It was the beginning of genuine understanding. But even as the wedding ceremony concluded successfully, trouble was brewing in both human and Zenthari space. General Tharkson, a powerful Zenthari military leader, announced that he would not recognize the marriage alliance. He claimed that Supreme Elder Kathmiran had been corrupted by alien influence, and that the pure Zenthari bloodline was being contaminated. On Earth, human supremacist groups launched terrorist attacks against alien diplomatic missions. They bombed Zenthari trade ships and assassinated human officials who supported the peace treaty. The very alliance that was supposed to prevent war seemed to be causing new conflicts. Jake found himself thrust into the role of joint military commander alongside his new wives. The first combined human Zenthari military operation was a disaster. Communication problems and cultural misunderstandings led to friendly fire incidents and unnecessary casualties. Human pilots could not understand Zenthari battle formations, and Zenthari warriors thought human tactics were cowardly and dishonorable. The crisis came during a battle above Zenther Prime's largest moon. Rebel Zenthari forces had captured human civilian transport and were threatening to execute the prisoners unless the marriage alliance was dissolved. Jake led a rescue mission with both human and Zenthari ships, but the coordination problems made the operation extremely dangerous. When the rebel ships opened fire on the civilian transport, Jake made a desperate decision. He broke formation and flew his fighter directly into the path of the enemy weapons, using his ship as a shield to protect the helpless civilians. The explosion that followed was massive, and everyone thought Jake had been killed. Velinara felt his apparent death through their telepathic bond like a physical blow. The pain and loss she experienced shocked her into realizing that her feelings for Jake had grown far beyond mere political convenience. Zixara's reaction was equally intense. Her analytical mind could not accept the possibility that their husband was gone, and she began scanning for any sign that he might have survived. Rescue teams found Jake's fighter drifting in space, badly damaged but with life support still functioning. He was unconscious and seriously injured, but alive. When he woke up in the medical bay, both princesses were waiting beside his bed with expressions of relief and something deeper. "Why did you do such a foolish thing?" Velinara asked, though. Her voice was gentle instead of angry. "You could have been killed." Jake smiled weakly. "Those were innocent people. Human or Zenthari, it does not matter. I could not let them die if there was something I could do to save them." Zixara touched his hand carefully with one of her forearms. "Your willingness to sacrifice yourself for Zenthari civilians has been broadcast across our entire territory. Many of our people who oppose the alliance are beginning to change their minds. The incident became a turning point in the relationship between the species. Jake's actions proved to skeptics on both sides that the marriage was more than empty. Ceremony. A human had been willing to die to save Zentari lives, and that meant something even to the most hardcore opponents of the alliance. General Tharksun's rebellion lost support as more Zenthari began to see humans as potential family, rather than enemies. The terrorist attacks on Earth decreased as human supremacists found it harder to convince people that all aliens were evil when their own species. Representative had nearly died protecting alien civilians, but as Jake recovered from his injuries, intelligence reports warned of new and more dangerous threats. The extreme elements from both species were not giving up. They were organizing into something bigger and more coordinated. The Shadow Coalition was forming in secret, dedicated to destroying the Alliance and both species if necessary. Jake, Valinara, and Zixara had won the first battle for peace, but the war for the future of both civilizations. 6 months after the wedding, Jake and his wives had established their home aboard the UHS-ZC Harmony, the first ship designed by both human and Zenthari engineers working together. The vessel was a marvel of combined technology, with sections that could accommodate the needs of both species. Jake often walked through the corridors and marveled at how different engineering approaches had created something neither species could have built alone. Living with 2 alien wives was nothing like Jake had imagined. The telepathic bond between them had grown stronger over time, allowing them to share thoughts and emotions in ways that went beyond normal marriage. Sometimes Jake would wake up in the morning already knowing what Valinara had dreamed about, or he would find himself understanding complex Centauri politics because Zixara's knowledge had somehow transferred to him during their sleep. His relationship with Valinara developed through their shared military duties. She taught him advanced Zentari combat techniques that used all 4 arms in coordination, while he showed her human tactical innovations that emphasized mobility and surprise over direct confrontation. Their different approaches to warfare complemented each other perfectly. During a mission to protect a convoy of human medical supplies bound for a Zenthari colony hit by plague, they worked together like dancers who had practiced the same routine for years. Valinara's warrior instincts told her when enemies were approaching, while Jake's strategic mind found ways to outmaneuver superior forces. The telepathic bond let them coordinate their actions without speaking, moving and fighting as if they shared the same body. After the successful mission, as they stood together on the bridge, watching the medical ships dock safely at the Zenthari station, Valinara said something that surprised Jake. "I used to think that dying gloriously in battle was the highest honor a warrior could achieve. But keeping people alive and safe feels more important now." Jake looked at her blue face and saw something he had never expected to see there: contentment. The fierce warrior who had challenged him to combat on their first meeting was still there, but she had found something beyond the endless cycle of violence that had defined her life. With Zixara, the connection formed through intellectual collaboration and late-night conversations. She helped him understand the complex web of galactic politics, while he provided insights into human psychology and behavior that fascinated her analytical mind. They would spend hours in the ship's library, discussing everything from military strategy to philosophy. Humans are the only species we have encountered that creates art for its own sake, Zingara observed one evening as they reviewed reports from the latest diplomatic missions. Most alien races make things because they are useful or because tradition demands it. But you make music and pictures simply because they are beautiful. Jake smiled. Beauty matters. It gives people something to fight for beyond just survival. Zixara was quiet for a moment, processing this concept. "I think I am beginning to understand human humor as well." It is not just random nonsense. It is a way of finding joy, even in difficult situations. To demonstrate, she told a joke she had constructed using human comedic principles. It was awkward, and the timing was wrong, but Jake laughed anyway, because her serious expression while delivering the punchline was genuinely funny. Zixara's face lit up with pleasure at his reaction. The telepathic bond had unexpected benefits beyond emotional connection. In battle, Jake could coordinate with his wives with supernatural precision. When Velinara sensed danger, Jake immediately knew about it. When Zixara calculated the best tactical approach, both Jake and Velinara understood her reasoning instantly. They became the most effective command team in either fleet, but their growing happiness was threatened by the emergence of the Shadow Coalition, a secretive alliance of extremists from both species working to destroy the peace. The coalition operated in small cells that were almost impossible to track, and they had access to classified information from both governments. The first major attack came without warning. The joint colony on New Geneva, where humans and Xanthari had been living together peacefully for 4 months, was hit by bombs that killed over 300 people. The attack was designed to look like it came from the other species. Human-style explosives were used in Xanthari districts, while Xanthari weapons targeted human neighborhoods. Jake, Velinara, and Zixara arrived at New Geneva within hours of the attack. The scene was heartbreaking. Human and Xanthari survivors worked together to dig victims out of the rubble, but the damage went beyond just physical destruction. The trust that had been slowly building between the species was shattered in a single night. "This makes no sense," Jake said as he examined the bomb fragments. "The explosives are human-made, but they were placed with Xanthari precision. No human knows our people well enough to target specific cultural sites, and no Xanthari understands human psychology well enough to create maximum psychological impact." Zixara's analytical mind was already working on the problem. Someone with detailed knowledge of both species planned this attack. The goal was not just to kill people, but to make each side blame the other and restart the war. Their investigation led them to discover that the Shadow Coalition had infiltrated both governments at high levels. The rebels were sharing intelligence and resources, united in their belief that the two species were too different to coexist peacefully. The most painful discovery came when they learned that Dr. Amy Phillips, Jake's trusted advisor and friend, had been feeding information to the coalition. Jake could not believe it at first. Dr. Phillips had helped him understand Xanthari culture and had supported the alliance from the beginning. When they confronted her in her laboratory aboard the Harmony, Dr. Phillips did not try to deny her involvement. "I did what I believed was right," she said calmly. "The marriage alliance is a beautiful dream, Jake, but it cannot work long term. Humans and Xanthari are too different. Eventually, one species will dominate the other, and both cultures will be destroyed." "So you decided to destroy both cultures yourself," Velinara said angrily. Her 4 hands moved toward her weapons, but Jake stopped her with a thought through their bond. "I tried to prevent a greater tragedy," Dr. Phillips continued. "The coalition offers a clean break, separate territories, separate governments, no more forced integration. Both species can develop naturally without contaminating each other." Zixara stepped forward. "Your coalition's methods involve murdering innocent people, including children. How is that preventing tragedy?" For the first time, Dr. Phillips looked uncertain. Sometimes difficult choices must be made for the greater good. Jake felt sick. These were the same words he had used to justify his own difficult decisions as a military commander, but hearing them used to defend terrorism made him understand how wrong that thinking could be. Dr. Phillips' arrest sent shockwaves through both governments. If someone so close to the Alliance leadership could be a traitor, who else might be working for the coalition? Security procedures were increased, but the atmosphere of suspicion made cooperation between the species more difficult. Coalition's next attack was even more direct. During a major diplomatic conference where human and Xanthari leaders were negotiating new trade agreements, assassins struck at the heart of the gathering. They used advanced weapons that combined human and Xanthari technology, creating explosions that could penetrate the strongest shields. Jake was standing next to Supreme Elder Kathmiran when the attack began. Without thinking, he threw himself between the ancient Xanthari leader and the explosion, taking the full force of the blast on his own body. The last thing he saw before unconsciousness took him was Valinara and Zix-Ara rushing toward him. Their faces twisted with fear and rage. Jake woke up 3 days later in the medical bay of the Harmony. His body was covered with bandages, and he could barely move without pain. But the first thing he saw was both his wives sitting beside his bed, their faces showing relief and something deeper. "The doctor said you might not survive," Valinara sighed quietly. "Your human body is not designed to withstand that kind of damage." "Why did you do it?" Zix-Ara asked. "Grandfather Kathmiran is old. His death would have been sad, but not unexpected. You could have been killed protecting him." Jake struggled to sit up. "He is your family. That makes him my family, too. I could not let him die if there was something I could do to prevent it." Both princesses stared at him for a long moment. Then, almost simultaneously, they leaned forward and kissed him on the forehead, a gesture of deep affection in Xanthari culture. "I think I understand now what humans call love, Vel." The Shadow Coalition revealed its true strength when simultaneous attacks began on Earth and Xantha Prime. Jake watched in horror from the bridge of the Harmony as enemy fleets emerged from hyperspace around both homeworlds. The ships were a deadly mixture of human and Xanthari technology, faster and more powerful than anything other species had built alone. Admiral Lisa Carter's voice crackled over the communication system from Earth's orbital defense platforms. "Jake, they hit us without warning. These ships are using our own weapon designs, combined with Xanthari shielding technology. Our defenses are not designed to handle this kind of hybrid attack." At the same time, reports came in from Xantha Prime, where Supreme Elder Kathmiran was coordinating the defense of his homeworld. "The enemy knows exactly where our weak points are," he reported. "They are targeting our cultural sites and civilian shelters with precision that only someone with intimate knowledge of our cities could possess." Jake, Valinara, and Zix-Ara stood together on the bridge, their telepathic bond allowing them to process information from both battles simultaneously. The connection that had once felt strange and invasive now felt like their greatest asset, letting them coordinate across vast distances in ways no other command team could match. "This is not random terrorism," Zix-Ara observed as she analyzed the attack patterns. "The Coalition is trying to provoke maximum emotional response from both species. They want to create so much hatred that peace becomes impossible even if we defeat them militarily." Valinara's warrior instincts were focused on the immediate tactical situation. Their fleet composition suggests they plan to fight a long campaign, rather than a quick strike. They have supply ships and mobile repair facilities. This coalition has been planning this war for months. Jake made the decision that would define the rest of the conflict. "We split our forces. Valinara, take half our ships and coordinate the defense of Xantha Prime. Zix-Ara, you will manage the overall strategic situation from here. I will take the other half of our fleet to Earth." Both princesses immediately protested. "We should stay together," Valinara said. "Our bond makes us more effective when we are in the same location." "The telepathic connection works across any distance," Jake replied. "And we need to show both species that this alliance is real. Humans need to see a Xanthari warrior defending Earth, and Zentari need to see a human willing to die for Zentha Prime. The separation was painful. For months, they had grown used to being physically close, and the telepathic bond felt strained when stretched across interstellar distances. But as the battles intensified, they discovered that their connection actually grew stronger under stress. Jake led his combined human Zenthari fleet in a desperate defense of Earth's moon bases. The enemy had somehow obtained detailed information about every defensive position, but they had not counted on the innovative tactics that resulted from mixing human creativity with Zenthari. Honor-based combat traditions dot when conventional shield. Formations failed against the hybrid weapons. Jake ordered his ships to adopt Zenthari honor dual positioning. Instead of hiding behind defensive barriers, the fleet moved in ceremonial combat patterns that confused the Coalition's targeting systems. The enemy had prepared for either human or Zenthari tactics, but not for the combination of both. Meanwhile, Valinara's defensive Zentha Prime showcased her evolution from pure warrior to strategic commander. She used human-style mobility tactics to keep her forces moving unpredictably, while maintaining the disciplined formations that Zenthari military tradition demanded. Her four-armed coordination allowed her to manage multiple battlefronts simultaneously, in ways that amazed even veteran Zenthari officers. The turning point came when Zizara's analysis revealed the location of the Coalition's command center. Hidden in an asteroid field between the two homeworlds, a massive space station was coordinating all enemy operations. The station was protected by both human and Zenthari military technology, making it nearly impregnable. The station is the key to everything, Zixara reported through their telepathic link. If we can capture it, we can end the war and find out who has been leading the Coalition. The assault on the command station required the most complex military operation ever attempted by the Alliance. Ships from both Earth and Zentha Prime had to coordinate their attack while still defending their homeworlds from ongoing Coalition strikes. The telepathic bond between Jake, Valinara, and Zixara became the communication center for the entire Operation Dot as Jake's strike force approached the asteroid field. The station's defenses activated, weapons that combined human precision with Zenthari power output created a deadly maze of energy beams and explosive projectiles. Ships began exploding all around them, but the mixed crews of humans and Zenthari kept fighting with determination that surprised even themselves. The breakthrough came when Valinara's fleet arrived from Zentha Prime just as Jake's force was about to be overwhelmed. The two fleets merged into a single devastating attack that shattered the station's outer defenses. But as they prepared to board the facility, a shocking revelation emerged. The Coalition's leader was not some unknown extremist, but General Karkson, the younger brother of the Zenthari military commander Tharkson, who had opposed the marriage alliance from the beginning. Karkson was a brilliant scientist who had spent years developing weapons that could destroy both species completely. "You are too late," Karkson announced over the communication system as Jake, Valinara, and Zixara fought their way through the station's corridors. "I have activated the purification protocol. In 30 minutes, energy pulses will sterilize both Earth and Zentha Prime of all organic life. The galaxy will be cleansed of the contamination you represent." The weapon was a nightmare of combined technology that used human quantum physics and Zenthari energy manipulation to create planet-killing beams. Worse, the only way to stop it was for someone to manually override the controls at the station's core, where the radiation levels would be fatal within minutes. Jake, Valinara, and Zixara reached the control center together, but found themselves facing an impossible choice. The override required 3 people to operate simultaneously, but the radiation would kill anyone who stayed at the controls for more than a few minutes. "We can share the exposure through our telepathic bond," Zixara realized If we distribute the lethal radiation between the three of us, each person receives only a third of the dose. It will be painful, but survivable. The process was agony beyond description. As they operated the complex controls, deadly energy flowed through their bodies and across their mental connection. Jake felt his cells being damaged by radiation, while simultaneously experiencing the same pain in duplicate through his wife's perspectives. All three of them were suffering, but none of them had to endure the full lethal dose alone. When the purification protocol finally shut down, all three collapsed to the floor of the control room. They were badly injured and would need months of medical treatment, but they were alive. More importantly, both Earth and Zenther Prime were safe. The capture of the Coalition's command center ended the war, but it also revealed the full scope of the conspiracy. Documents found in the station showed that extremists from dozens of species had been supporting the human-Xanthari conflict, hoping that mutual annihilation would eliminate two potential rivals for galactic dominance. 1 year later, Jake stood on the observation deck of the Harmony, watching human and Xanthari children play together in the ship's garden. His daughter Hope, the first child born to a human Xanthari family, represented everything they had fought to protect. She had her father's brown hair and her mother's ice blue eyes, and her genetic structure showed that the two species could indeed create a shared future. Valinara joined him at the window, her hand resting on her pregnant belly where their second child was growing. "Do you ever regret the choice you made in the arbitration court?" she asked. Jake smiled and put his arm around her waist. "How can I regret a decision that brought me the two most amazing women in the galaxy and gave both our peoples a chance?" "For peace?" Zigzara approached from the other side, carrying little Hope, who was babbling happily in a mixture of English and Xanthari. "I have been analyzing the birth rate statistics from the joint colonies. Human Xanthari couples are producing children at 3 times the rate of single-species families. Our descendants will inherit a galaxy where cooperation is natural instead of extraordinary." The telepathic bond flowed between them, carrying not just words, but the deep contentment they all felt. What had begun as an impossible political arrangement had become the foundation for a new kind of civilization that combined the best qualities of both species. Outside the window, ships from a dozen different alien races arrived for the signing of the Galactic Cooperation Accords. The success of the Human-Xanthari alliance had inspired other species to consider peaceful cooperation instead of endless territorial disputes. Jake reflected on the journey that had brought him to this moment. 1.5 years ago, he had been a simple military commander faced with an impossible choice. Now he was part of something that would shape the future of the galaxy for generations to come. As he watched his daughter play with children from both species, Jake knew that every sacrifice had been worth